Good morning, everybody. Good morning. If I could ask for your attention so we could start. Great, thank you. We have a packed agenda today, so lots of work to do, lots of good reports here to go through. I want to welcome everybody to meeting 7 of the Planning and Housing Committee. Welcome to the members of the committee and other members of council in attendance and the members of the public. Thank you for joining us today. For those in the room with us, the screen at the back of the room provides real-time updates concerning where we are in the agenda and what's coming up next. You can follow the agenda and debate on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on its traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the May 28th, 2019 meeting? Councillor Perks, all those in favor, that carries. So let's run through the agenda. Item 7.1, changing lanes, the City of Toronto's review of laneway suites, citywide expansion of city-initiated official plan amendment and zoning amendment final report. We have deputants on that. Item 7.2, Task Force zoning bylaw amendment for breweries and related uses. It's a timed item. Okay. Item 7.4, a new approvals framework for, no, I missed one, 7.3. Appeals of citywide zoning bylaw 569-2013, request for direction. And we have deputants on that. 7.4, a new approvals framework for Toronto Community Housing Corporation revitalization projects. We also have speakers on that.
And Madam Chair, I may need to go in camera for some of that item.
For some of that item, you'd like to go in camera? Okay, I'll take note of that. And for item 7.5, expanding the housing allowance program, we also have speakers. 7.6, activating federal provincial funding to increase housing options for Toronto residents. Also have speakers on that. Item 7.7, expanding supportive housing in Toronto. We also have speakers on that. And 7.8, Charles Hastings Cooperative Inc., postponement of registered assisted housing agreement of the prospective lender's mortgage. If I could get a motion, maybe we can dispose of this item. Councillor Bradford, all those in favor, that carries. And 7.9, emergency management and vital service disruption response in apartment buildings. We need to hold that for speakers. 7.10, official plan review, public consultation, comments, and revised policies on built form and public realm. Councillor Fletcher moves that. All those in favor? That carries. And item 7.11, citywide heritage survey feasibility study. We have speakers. And 7.12, how does the city grow? We will have a presentation on that. And that is our agenda for today. Just a short one. Well, lots of good stuff. Okay, let's start with item 7.1. That's changing lanes, the City of Toronto's review of laneway suites, citywide expansion of city-initiated official plan amendment and zoning amendment final report. And the first speaker is Jeremy Schwartz. Jeremy? Good morning, Jeremy. Yes, you have 5 minutes. You can keep track on that clock over there.
Thank you to the committee for the opportunity to speak. I'm here to lend my support for the citywide expansion of laneway suites. Without the passage of the amendments last year, my laneway suite likely never would have been approved. As of this fall, there will now be one more rental unit available downtown. So thank you for making this process so transparent and easy. With that being said, I implore this committee to use the momentum it has gained to unlock other forms of density. As you all know, Toronto is beyond desperate for for the creation of new rental stock. And furthermore, we are at serious risk of losing our competitive advantage, the highly skilled labor force that calls this city home. This is no longer a housing affordability issue. It affects the city's ability to compete globally for the jobs of tomorrow. If businesses cannot attract or retain talent, they will create jobs elsewhere. So I really hope that we don't find out what that Toronto looks like. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any questions? Seeing none. Next speaker, Karen Gorsline. Good morning, Karen. Thanks for joining us today. You have 5 minutes. Okay.
I have Karen Gorsline here with me as well.
Okay. So are you sharing the 5 minutes or 5 minutes each? Okay.
So again, I'm Catherine Bohr. I'm a member of the board of directors of the ABC Residents Association, and Karen Gorsline is a former member of the board and was actively participating in the consultation process last year on laneway housing. For those of you who don't know ABC, we are the neighborhood that's bounded by Avenue Road to the west, Bloor Street to the south, the CP tracks to the north, and Yonge Street to the east. And our Residents Association has been around since 1957, actively involved in participating in municipal issues on behalf of our residents. I want to start off by saying that we are not opposed to laneway housing in principle, but that we do have some policy and practical concerns that were expressed during the consultation process last year. I personally don't have a vested interest in whether the housing goes in or not, but I'm here to gain your support to honor City Council's earlier specific direction with respect to the SASP 211 review on laneway suites. During last year's consultation process, ABC expressed a number of concerns, some of which, such as height and overlook, have been addressed with the policy, but others, such as lane size, traffic, and neighborhood character, have been not adequately addressed. Most importantly for our neighborhood, ABCRA feels that neighborhood character has not been adequately addressed with the policy. Laneway suite height, size, and setbacks are not the only aspects of character that should be considered when looking at laneway housing policy. What may be great in one neighborhood may not be an appropriate fit with the character of another. Any laneway suites built in SASP 211 should be consistent with character of the area. I'm just going to take a moment to show a picture. I hope that it will show up. Do I just put that on here? Yeah? Not sure. There we go. Okay, great. So the picture on the right shows the type of laneway housing dwellings that have been coming up in the city. Very modern, very sleek. Nothing wrong with that type of architecture. I quite like it myself, but it doesn't necessarily fit into some of the more character neighborhoods that we have in the city, especially in our neighborhood where the Bay and Gables character is quite dominant. And so we're very concerned about the very stark and very jarring contrast that will arise in the laneway suites that are in our neighborhood. The neighborhood section of the official plan set a baseline for what is expected throughout Toronto. Secondary plans and site and area-specific policies set out more refined and detailed expectations and criteria that are specific and unique to an area such as ABC. SASP 211 goes beyond looking at just building structure and placement on lots, and includes unique features and aesthetic aspects of a neighborhood, such as the Bay and Gables architectural style that I just mentioned that's in view here. As part of changing lanes approval in June of 2018, City Council adopted the following regarding SASP 211, which you're likely familiar with, but please allow me to quote. City Council direct the Chief Planner and Executive Director, City Planning, to consider any necessary policies and/or bylaw standards to permit and regulate laneway suites as part of the review of Site and Area-Specific Policy 211. ABCRA requests the 2018 City Council direction that laneway suites be looked at in the context of the SASP 211 review be honored. This is what Council agreed to and approved, and we do not see a reason why this change at this time is taking place until we have SASP 211 in place, which we expect to be sometime in the fall, as far as we've been told. Nothing to our knowledge has changed since the date of City Council's direction that would warrant a change in that direction. I should also add that our councillor, Mike Layton, has expressed to us that he agrees that the ABC neighborhood should maintain council's direction regarding SASP 211, and we hope that you'll agree with this position as well today. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much. And any questions? Seeing none? Karen?
I'm actually here as moral support and background in terms of what has gone on. I would comment that we have included a few examples of where architectural features and things are in other SASPs. This is not unique in terms of it being an important factor of neighborhood character, and also that some other jurisdictions are looking more seriously at some of this. So really, I'm here if there's questions, if I can be helpful in answering those questions.
I don't think there's any question. I just, one for clarification. You're here just asking that this work on the reviews of laneway housing be part of the 211. That's basically, okay. It's not that you're opposing, you've started a piece of work that you want to have this included in there and have an holistic view of everything.
Correct. To take into consideration character of our neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. And next up, Craig Race.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Craig Race from Lanescape. We were fairly involved in the creation of the policy, and we've been involved in communicating with many homeowners who have started undertaking designs and work on laneway houses. I would like to say that the intention I thought that would come of the policy is one that would allow citizens of Toronto to build their own laneway houses. This was not something designed for developers, something to create rental opportunities for families by families. And we found that in almost every single case for the hundreds of people we've spoken to, that has been what has resulted. This is homeowners building these for loved ones and to rent for themselves. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to provide insight on the people we've been speaking to.
I think, any questions?
Thanks very much.
No, thanks, Craig. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none. Oh, one more. Please come forward. Good morning.
Good morning. I don't have a specific comment. I'm an architect and city planner with over 45 years' experience abroad. There are very good examples of this sort of development in the UK, in London in particular, with Muse housing. But some of the points that I want to raise are, one is that there's a consistency of character in the style and the housing and the height. Over there, they allow the ground floor, which used to be for carriages and horses, to be included in the accommodations. So you sometimes have ground plus one, other times ground plus two. So my first point is are you going to allow any style, or is there going to be some kind of consistency of character? In my case, I'm interested because I have some houses in the annex, so the style is Victorian. So do you get every style, or is there going to be some kind of relationship to what exists? The other point is that the road surface, if you want to create a good environment, you need to treat the road surface also. Again, the example of them use that they have cobbles, but you don't have to have cobbles, but something of that sort of nature. Really, those are the sort of points.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, questions of staff? Councillor Fletcher?
I just have a question because I've had a number of applications for laneway housing in my new ward, both sides of the border of the Danforth. And sometimes people are running into problems with the Committee of Adjustment or a little encroachment that they're seemingly having some trouble unraveling. And I'm just wondering if we could comment on how easy the application process has been and what assistance there is to people who are trying to create these new laneway houses.
Through the speaker, and I can have the senior planner supplement my comment. We're in a 2-year monitoring period for this first batch of laneway, we expected that we would encounter a few learning experiences around easements, other tricks of the trade, so to speak, as people get used to how they develop laneway housing. One of the major intents of this initiative was to make it easy and make it straightforward. So these will be important things for us to understand as we go through the monitoring period. I don't know, Greg, if you want to add something?
Through the chair, since laneway suites were permitted as of last year, we've had ongoing dialogue with the building department, committee of adjustment staff. When issues arise, we're trying to come to a consistent understanding about how to process the applications and better advise people who call us with inquiries. And that'll continue.
Any further questions, Councillor?
No, that's
Good.
fine.
Thank you.
I'm assuming that as we get wrinkles, that we improve on the wrinkles, so we don't have continuous wrinkles, we have continuous improvement. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Perks?
Let's talk parking. So reading the report, page 20 and 21, you talk about the parking, suggesting that removing the requirement for parking is something that the Transportation Department routinely does not have a problem with, and yet we still require a variance.
To respond to that, the bylaw for laneway suites does not require a parking space to be provided on the lot for the laneway suite. It also does not require that a parking space continue to be provided for the main house on the lot. That's the way that the current bylaw is written, and those provisions are proposed to be expanded to the area noted in the report.
So what does it mean on page 21, where there's a paragraph saying that typically it's done by minor variance?
That was, so absent the laneway suites bylaw applying to the expanded
So
area.
the laneway suite takes care of that.
correct.
See, I learned. We're moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Questions?
I have questions. In your report, there's a map on the, Councillor Perks, is there an issue? Is there an issue?
Councillor, can you ask your questions?
Yeah, but there was something going on, so I wasn't clear on what was happening. So in the report, there's a map, and in the map, there's all sorts of these little dots. Did you do any consultation in the affected areas?
Through the chair, city planning staff, in consultation with a number of other city divisions who were involved in processing consideration of laneway suites applications and the creation of this report, hosted meetings in each one of the 4 city districts within the month of May. Notice was given in local newspapers to interested parties in the initial changing lanes study and anybody who contacted us in the interim. We also provided an email update with details of what was being proposed and what was approved to every residents association email that the city has on file in the city, similar to the approach we took in 2017, 2018 when these were considered initially.
But did you, so if I look at zero in on one ward, Ward 15, I see, I'd say 3 masses, small masses. Did you drop notices to the people that are actually affected? That's what I want to know. Were they aware, outside of an ad in the Toronto Star, which, you know, people read different media outlets, they listen to the news. Did you drop, in these areas that I see, did you drop notices to those people to know that things are changing in their neighborhood, their immediate neighborhood?
No, we didn't provide notices specifically to each one of those addresses.
And why wouldn't you have done that, given this is a significant change?
We felt that the approach to outreach and consultation was adequate and engaged, you know, a broad number of people in the city, even those who do not live on houses with laneway suites. During the consultation process, we were approached by a number of people who may not be able to realize the benefits of building a laneway suite as they don't live on a house, live in a house with a laneway, but were interested in other types of auxiliary dwelling units those questions were raised fairly frequently. So we wanted to cast a broad net and in my view, that's what our approach achieved.
So I agree with catching the broad net, because it's a decision for the whole city, but the neighborhoods that are affected significantly by the transformation that's being proposed should have had individual drops to their homes. So I guess, can you still do that? Is that something you could still do, is drop to the areas where their changes are proposed?
Through the chair, that's typically not our process on a citywide policy shift like this. We've maintained a very strong social media presence throughout this initiative. We've run ads in the newspaper. We hold district meetings. We've had specific meetings with residents associations through the big round of consultation that happened with the first initiative. We feel the issue's been well socialized, and we've made ourselves available, strenuously available, to anybody and everyone who wanted to talk about this as a really positive initiative. And we also have really good relationships, of course, with the residents associations, and are available at any time to take a deep dive on any of these matters. And we would certainly be happy to do that before council. I would have trouble, though, with a drop in terms of the cost and the added bonus that it would give us in terms of consultation. I think the matter is well understood from my perspective, but we'd certainly make ourselves available for any association who wants to have a talk about this before it gets to council. Be happy to do that.
So you don't think the people who are going to end up with these in their backyards, potentially, or in their neighborhoods, should be notified with a notification that this is happening?
We feel
being proposed?
We feel actually that we've provided more than adequate notice, and certainly the statutory notice has been provided. The statutory notice that's required under the Planning Act has been provided.
Okay, well, I don't agree with you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, speakers? Are there any speakers on the item? Okay. Councillor Cressy.
Well, thank you, Chair. Just a couple words on laneway housing. First of all, what it is and what it is not. What it is, as it's being carefully developed, first piloted in TYCC and now coming citywide, is purpose-built rental. That is what it's intended to be, or accommodations for in-laws and others. But it is purpose-built rental within primarily established neighborhoods which have become financially inaccessible. And this is, sorry, Councillor Burt. It is intended to focus on the so-called missing middle. This will not change rental affordability overnight, but it is smart, it is appropriate, and it provides an additional housing option for renters who will be able to afford but currently can't access this type of housing. What it is not is affordable housing. And that's okay. We need a range of housing options in this city. We desperately need affordable housing, but this is a by-design project to increase purpose-built rental housing. And we've built in some mechanisms to improve the amount of affordable housing with this, and that's all value-added and good. But this is about ensuring that we have a range of housing options, market-based housing options, for those who need it. I can tell you from when this was the lead up to and the pilot in TYCC, Toronto and East York Community Council, city staff worked exceptionally hard, as did councillors. I know this was brought on by Councillor Bailau and former Councillor McMahon, to develop a policy framework that I thought created a box whereby we can easily establish this type of housing. From a design point of view, a greening point of view, the lack of severance to make it, to ensure its rental. And to me, it's simply in a growing city. Not only is this type of housing appropriate, it's necessary. It's not the solution, it's not a silver bullet, but it is one increased tool that we need in a city where people simply can't afford to live regardless of your income level. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Robinson?
Yes, I have 3 motions I'd like to place. So, you know, this certainly is an innovative idea and certainly interesting. I just think that we have to do the right consultation on it with the neighborhoods that are actually affected. So that's why I would like to ensure that, neighborhoods are aware this is happening, one. Two, that all those issues around privacy are managed and impacts are mitigated. And three, I think a lot of neighborhoods would not be thrilled if these became Airbnbs. Not that I have anything huge issue with Airbnb, but they have had a lot of impacts, negative impacts on neighborhoods.
Put it in the bylaw.
And so we have to ensure that's not the case. And I know certainly my residents associations are concerned about that, those unintended consequences. So I'm moving these motions to make sure that we're doing the proper consultation with the affected neighborhoods, and local councillors have that opportunity. And then also to do consultation with the Federation of the North Toronto Residents Association, which I think represents, I don't know how many, many associations. And then three is the Committee of Adjustment, getting the proper training on this. And then also back to the Committee Adjustment, that there be a report written from the planning staff on these items, because, it's new and it's different, and we have to make sure we manage this effectively.
Thank you. Councillor
Mover, are you expecting that would slow down any of the approvals? Because they're already fairly slow.
They're already fairly, sorry?
Slow. And they're, so this,
No, I don't think, why would this slow it down? This is about consultation, and I don't think this would slow it down.
all that, I mean,
This is the process. I'm just saying, let's tighten up the process, so ensure that we have the proper consultation, the proper staff training, which we should be doing. We should be making sure our appeal panels have proper training anyway. So I'm saying, put this in the mix. And I'm saying to ensure that there's staff reports along with these, because it's a new initiative. So when you have a new initiative, you have to ensure that you're looking at impacts, that you're looking at unintended consequences, and you're consulting. That's what what City Hall's for, to ensure that we're consulting.
I understand, but there's not normally a staff report on everything that comes forward to Committee of Adjustment. There's usually only a staff report if there's a problem with something coming to the Committee of Adjustment. That's my experience in watching the committee, that if there's a variance that, let's say you want a front yard parking, but you're not allowed to, then they'll write. But other than that, our planning staff, as I understand, they're not writing every time something's in front of the committee.
So what I'm saying is, this is now spreading out throughout the city. That's what's being proposed, so it's new and it's different, and so we have to make sure the right steps are in place as the process unfolds. There's no way that any of this could slow it down. The Committee of Adjustment hearing is set, the date is set, you can't change the date, so that doesn't slow any of, your thinking that this might slow things down is not accurate.
I'm thinking that having to write a staff report every time might slow that down.
Sure, that's what the councillor is asking. Let me try this. I know where you're going. Let me try. Councillor, you're asking that all the variances are looked at and are part of the monitoring process, so that when we get the report back, there's actually some analysis on what kind of variances have been asked, and so that we can monitor that. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm talking about Committee of Adjustment.
Yeah, anytime there's a variance that is taken in consideration, so when the monitoring report comes back, we actually understand what kind of variances have been asked and so on, right? You're not asking staff to write to Committee of Adjustment every time there's a laneway housing application.
Well, it depends on, well, first of all, I don't think there's going to be a deluge of them, so I think that, I think it might be a good idea to look at everyone that's coming, certainly, and I would like to see that happen in my ward. It's not a huge area in my ward that's that this is being proposed for.
Yeah, you have very few laneways.
Yeah, but I would like those people to be in the loop and aware and consulted with. So sooner than later. And I'm just concerned that this has just happened in a big picture way and not really in a micro way.
Clear, Councillor, if I can. you in your verbal said that there would be a staff report to the committee. This just appears that there'd be an analysis. So I'm unclear. I mean, staff always look, they only write if there's an issue that they feel they need to raise with the committee. Rather than having to write every time.
No, but not in North York. Even when there's an issue, they don't always write a report. They don't do that. So that's what I'm saying, is that has to happen. That has to happen.
Okay. But in your motion, you're actually including the whole city, so you're actually asking for every
Well,
time
I didn't
there's-
want to, I would have loved to put forward Ward 15, but I felt that was a little bit much, but I'm happy to just say Ward 15 or North York, if that makes people happier. I'm happy to amend this.
I think
These
Councillor
were the concepts I was going for.
Perks?
So, just trying to understand. So, there are two ways this could be read. One is that staff write a report when there's a laneway suite application and that report go to the Committee of Adjustment. Another way to read it is we have a monitoring report on the overall success of the program that's coming in 2 years, and that you would like, when that report comes, that this analysis be included in this. Which of those two interpretations is your intention?
Right. So my intention is your former, but you could be right in saying staff actually helped me write this, so planning staff. So it's a good point. I was looking for a report when it goes to the COA,
Yes.
a report accompanying that.
Okay, if that's your intention, I understand.
Yeah. I guess maybe it should be tweaked a little bit here.
Councillor
Because-
Bradford, do you have questions of the mover? No? Okay.
Maybe the councillor would like to tweak that a little bit. Just stand it down and do it.
Maybe if I just took out the word monitoring of these language suites reports originally directed. Does that work?
Councillor Bradford?
So just to speak, no questions, this is my speaking. I could support that as that's written. I think it's a good motion as it's written. My thinking on this is actually we're probably going to learn a lot from this as these applications are coming in. We're going to see the type of minor variances that are coming forward and identify trends and consistencies in those applications, which could lead to direction of us actually updating the bylaw with respect to that. So I think that's why the monitoring report 2 years from now, which we'll have a fulsome discussion around, okay, here's the consistent minor variances, and when we want to take it up here or extend the garage to the property line or whatever, that's what that report is there for. That's a great place for that discussion. And so as it's written and everything that you've presented there in 1, 2, 3, I would be supporting what you had up there on the screen a few moments ago. But that wasn't my purpose of speaking here. What I wanted to say was a big congratulations to Councillor Bailau, former Councillor McMahon, Chief Planner Lintern, Greg Ewens, Kerry Mavakis, the whole team on getting us to the final report here. This is a pioneering effort in Toronto, long overdue, but very happy to see it. Enthusiastic supporter, would love to see more of these across Toronto and certainly Ward 19. And it's the beginning of more. And as we move forward with looking at coach house options, that's really important. It's incremental. It's incremental additional housing supply, incremental additional rental options, and that's all critical. I, for one, will be coming forward with other discussions about how we can actually make other changes to our zoning bylaw with respect to our residential neighborhoods and open up opportunities for even more incremental gentle density. And I think that's the next step for us to look at. And really the process that you guys went through here over the past number of years with this, I think is a great process for having those discussions and making those kind of changes and introducing that conversation with our neighborhoods and with our communities. And I will be calling for more from our chief planner and staff. Looking at our zoning bylaw and looking at opportunities to really bring some of that gentle density to our neighborhoods. So this is a pioneering effort. Thanks everyone for their work on it, and happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Madam Chair, The staff just came over and suggested on the first motion I add as part of the monitoring report. So I'll add that to it if I can, and.
Okay, I think that clarifies
And
things.
I may do different things at council, but that's good for now.
Thank you. I think that clarifies things. Any other speakers? Councillor Perks? Councillor Robinson spoke. Councillor Fletcher, would you like to speak, or Councillor Perks? No? Okay. So I'll just say a few words. Obviously, I want to thank staff for another great report. We worked with residents associations from day one, with residents groups from many community organizations. I usually say that this policy really started from the outside in, and it was a lot of the community groups and nonprofit organizations in the city that actually led the initial consultation efforts, and planning was right there beside them, but it was actually a really interesting way to bring policy into the city. I also like to think of this more as not so much the bricks and mortars, but about the people that end up living in it. And because I've participated in so many consultations, I actually had the opportunity to speak with a lot of people that are thinking about building laneway housing. And this is really about the way that people are living in our city. More and more people are talking about multi-generational homes. The amount of people that actually come to me and say, you know what, I'm thinking about building a laneway housing because I want to have my aging parents close by. I want to be able to have my young 30-year-old that can't afford anything in our neighborhood anymore to be able to live close by. I want to be able to buy this property, and I need the whole house because I have a growing family, but I need some rental income. And so a new rental unit is built, and that person is now able to buy a home. And those are the faces and the stories that I think we need to put in this policy. It's how we're affecting people's lives. And this is how people are living in Toronto. And I had a really interesting conversation. The other day I was in Councillor Perks' area, and we were talking about rooming houses with the Park Land Trust. And they were telling me that back in the 30s, it was extremely popular to have rooming houses because that's what people could afford. And it didn't have the connotation that ended up having after many years after. And when we look back at laneway housing, you see so many of them existing already in our city from back in the day that we had coach houses, we had nanny suites, we had people that, had some working spaces at the back. So the built form had actually existed in many, many instances. And we're just in many times just going back and addressing and responding to the way that our citizens are living in our city and responding to some of the challenges that they are facing. And I think that's the interesting thing about this policy, and that we have to do more of that in here, is that let's not have the bricks and mortars guide us so much, and let's actually have the people's stories what guide some of the policy and some of the ways that we're planning our city, and how do we respond to creating a healthy city, not only about bricks and mortars, but also about how people are living, interacting, and using our spaces. So with that, I'm also moving a motion on behalf of Councillor Layton, which is to continue the work that we had done with the ABC Residents Association, because they are doing the work on the site area and specific policy 211 that includes this. So this was done when we first moved the report last year, and we're just continuing to do that. So with that said, if I could get a vote on the motions, on Councillor J. Robinson's motions. All those in favor? That carries. And Councillor, my motion. All those in favor? That carries. And item as amended. All those in favor, can I have a recorded vote?
All those in favor of the item as amended, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Perks, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Bailao, Councillor Robinson. That motion carries.
Thank you so much. That is item number 1. And let's move on the agenda to 7.2, Task Force zoning bylaw amendments for breweries and related uses. Any speakers on the item? No, seeing none. Questions of staff? Councillor Robinson?
So as some of the planners know, I represent an area that has heavy industrial. And so I'm just wondering about use compatibility. And I know some of them did appear at the public meetings that were held, and I felt that were well advertised and promoted. So I guess I would ask that you maybe just give me a little bit of feedback on the use compatibility when you have those neighborhoods that are really not neighborhoods, but are business employment areas that are heavy industrial.
Through the chair, during the consultation meetings, representatives from a particular area, industrial area, came out and discussed the compatibility issues perceived between brewery uses and heavy industry. And that's something that we heard that in the consultation. We spoke about at length in the report. And in my view, the uses exist in a number of industrial areas throughout the city, and we're not specifically adding additional uses, additional types of uses. Restaurants, breweries, and in some cases patios are permitted. In this particular area, and in some areas in the light industrial or light employment and employment zones, we are introducing the use of patios with similar criteria and provisions to patios permitted in other industrial areas in the city, and that was the source of some concern. We had a good conversation, and as I said, we understand the issues raised by representatives from that particular area, and we discussed them in the report.
And so thank you for doing that. And so I guess I'm trying to picture a chemical plant beside a patio. So the restaurant's fine, the brewery, the making of, all that seems to work, but a patio in as a use compatibility with a chemical plant or a lot of truck circulation, like lots of big trucks trying to circulate through the business park. How does that square?
So in the city's view, the patios are not considered a sensitive use in terms of the Planning Act or requirements of the Ministry of Environment for use adjacency, which is why we felt comfortable recommending that they be included in the 3 of the 4 employment and industrial zone categories. We note that we aren't recommending that patios be permitted in heavy industry, which is where you would characteristically find the type of use described in your question.
Okay, so as this process unfolds and things end up before appeal bodies, I'm worried about what might happen. I've spoken to your colleagues many times about creep, and we've experienced that feels like monthly. So are we protecting employment lands / heavy, industrial lands, or are we not? Because I'm just worried about all this activity happening around the edges that are slowly creeping in, and various types of outlets that are there that really don't match what's happening in a business park.
Through the speaker, I would certainly concur with the overarching sentiment of the comment, Councillor. The policy framework that we have very much maintains our employment areas as places of work. In that context, the nature of work is changing a bit. So we've tried to walk that line between the effect that you're describing, the incremental changes that might be negative, and the incremental changes that might be positive that are happening in employment areas. We found with microbreweries, for example, and again, this is not affecting areas of heavy industry, but we found with microbreweries, and I've been to several, even though I don't drink beer. I'm just declaring that I have no bias here. But we found with several that it's that shift in the way that manufacturers are operating. Small microbreweries, they want a small eating or a place where you can try the beer, or maybe it's a small patio. Many of the ones that I've seen are very small, and they're very well positioned and very well placed. I don't think the microbreweries themselves want to put themselves in a position where they're going to conflict with their neighbors. So it just adds to the flavor of some of our employment areas without crossing the line and causing trouble with some of our major employers. But we're very much aware of that line that you're speaking about in your comment, and mindful of that as we look toward the future and the changing nature of work in the city.
So just, there is a development right now that's being proposed for the Leaside Business Park that is not a brewery, but it is, and your team would know about this, with a patio on the edge. So I guess my question to you is, does the city staff support industrial parks at this time, and will you continue to in the future, or should they cave?
Absolutely. We as per the official plan, we very much support the employment areas and the uses that are permitted in the official plan. The only point, and it's a small point that we're making with this, is that certainly microbreweries are permitted in these industrial areas. And incidentally, occasionally, one or two of them may want a patio use. And that's really the only small touch point here that we're discussing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? No, seeing none. Okay, speakers?
I'll speak.
Councillor Robinson?
Yes, thank you. So I want to thank staff for the comprehensive and well-thought-out report. And I think, definitely Toronto's craft breweries are an asset to our city, a great attraction for locals as well as tourists. So I just think we have to continue to think about use compatibility and these industrial manufacturers. Whether you like them or not, there is business parks in our city, and we have to make a decision whether we're supporting them or not, because they're feeling very much like they're being pushed out by some of the approvals of applications around them and the creep that's happening. So I just want to take this opportunity to highlight the patios are not ideal, because what happens is people are sitting on the patio and they're smelling smells and seeing big trucks, and they're very concerned about the aesthetic and the neighborhood as it stands, and so the complaints start. So I think we have to really, as we move forward, think about all these issues and how we facilitate them and navigate these things. But I do think this is a great initiative in the right place. Thank you.
Clarifications of the mover?
Well, I didn't move anything. Did I? Oh, I'm not moving anything. No, we decided not to. Oh, sorry, yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to make the point, but we're not going to move a motion.
Great. No problem. So no motions. Any other speakers? Any other speakers? Councillor Bradford?
Just very quickly, I'd like to say that I think this is a great amendment to our zoning bylaw. The East End has a ton of breweries, as many of you guys know, and I had a chance to visit Brunswick Beer Works last week. They're looking to expand. They're up in the Bermondsey area, and that's largely because of the success of the craft brewing scene that's growing in Ontario. 250 plus craft brewers, many of them are located here in the city. And as the economy changes and as we look to maintain employment, look to maintain manufacturing, having a zoning bylaw that reflects that changing dynamic is really important. So I want to thank staff for their work on this. And I am biased because I do drink beer. I actually enjoy it quite a bit. So this is a big win for the city and a big win for the East End. Thanks very much.
Any other speakers? Seeing none. Okay, I'd like to just make a few remarks. I do want to thank staff. I also want to thank our colleague, Councillor Layton, that I know he was working very closely with staff on this piece of work that is in front of us. I think if I'm not the councillor with the most breweries, I'm pretty up there. And okay, now we're going to have a challenge on this. No, but the reality is that for anybody that has a significant amount of breweries, we know that has been a challenge, because if they're on a main street, it's a challenge. If they're on employment land, it's a challenge. And these have turned out to be great business in our community who are employing people. A lot of them become great community members, doing lots of activities in the neighborhood. They become small community hubs. And I think that it's about time that we facilitate for these entrepreneurs to do business in the city and do it in a way that is well integrated and that they're allowed to become parts of our communities. And this is our city changing, it's our city evolving, and I think it's a good piece of work. So thank you for the work here. And with that, all those in favor of the report? And that carries. Okay. 7.3, appeals to citywide zoning bylaw 569-2013, request for direction. We have speakers, Jeff Cattell. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Chair Anna Blower and committee members. I'm here representing today, put on a hat, Confederation of Resident Ratepayer Associations of Toronto. This is the organization that's been a party at the OMB and now the LPAT hearing with respect to the appeals to the zoning bylaw 569-2013. I mean, really representing the interests of residents right across the city in that important zoning bylaw. The issue today is very straightforward in that staff is recommending that everything be kept confidential. We would absolutely oppose that idea in the interest of transparency and excuse me, and have proposed three proposed amendments to the recommendations. It requested that the proposed amendments be made public and open to review by all communities covered by the bylaw. The proposed amendment be added to the regular public consultation process before they go before a final vote by City Council, and the Planning and Housing Committee reserve its decision until the requests 1 and 2 have occurred. It's obviously crucial that the contents of such amendments be publicly accessible so that members of the public can appropriately access those and understand those proposals and weigh in on the issues. So it seems to us extraordinary that we want to keep these confidential. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the speaker? Seeing none. Questions of staff? I just want to warn the members of the committee that depending on what kind of questions you'd like to ask, we might need to go in camera, so we might need to stand down this item since Councillor Fletcher also said that she had another item to go in camera. So are there any questions of staff? Seeing none. Can I just, given the comment from the speaker, can staff just let us know why is this a confidential report?
Because we're in the middle of an appeal process and we're seeking instructions and providing legal advice to our client and to receive instructions back on how to continue within that appeal process. So it's very standard, giving legal advice, seeking legal direction.
Okay. Just hoping that it clarifies and informs the public a bit more. Can I have a motion to move the item? Councillor Perks, all those in favor? That carries. And 7.4, new approvals, framework for Toronto Community Housing Corporation revitalization projects. Michael Reagan. Michael? Is Michael here? Oh, yeah. Is you Michael? No? Oh. No? Okay. Andrew Marcinek? Andrew Marcinek? No? Okay. Howard Cohen? Howard Cohen? No? Okay. So is there anybody else that would like to speak on this item? We're now, oh, would Howard like to speak? Okay. So is there anybody else that would like to speak on the item? Anybody else that would like to speak on the item? Seeing none. Okay. Questions of staff? Yeah, this is on item 7.4, new approvals framework for Toronto Community Housing Corporation revitalization projects. Councillor Perks?
Okay, so first of all, bear with me. I received this yesterday at 3:45, and it's a complete change and a very complex change, so I'm not sure I understand all of it. If we approve this, comparing the circumstance we're in today and the circumstance we will be in if this is approved, how many additional times does a TCHC revitalization project come to City Council for approval?
Councillor, through the chair, one time.
One time, so it brings it to council one additional time. Okay. How many members of the public service who are not currently consulted by TCHC as part of a revitalization process will now be consulted by TCHC as part of a revitalization project?
Through the chair, so the additions as a part of this report would be that the consultation would occur with the Housing Secretariat, Create TO, as well as our city's real estate division.
And a couple of different deputy city managers, as I see it, right? Like the CFO.
That's correct.
And the deputy city manager for, I don't even know, we changed all the titles, Cluster C. Okay. How, so what kinds of citywide, I forget the language that's used in here. You have to forgive me. I didn't have time to give this as much of a think as I wanted to. There's language in here about, you know, why we have to have conversations with all these different members of the Toronto Public Service for, you know, city building purposes or something like that. What are those city building purposes that are different from things that the planning department would normally review?
Through the chair, Councillor, city planning would review the planning application. There are other divisions within the city that have an interest with respect to revitalization, given that this is public land, and potentially the co-location of other public services and public facilities on those lands. It's an important part of city building. And similarly, the financial implications of the project may, in some instances, involve a contribution in the form of either capital or operating. Just by way of example, Councillor, if you look at the revitalization of Regent Park and the public services that have been added to Regent Park, that happened not through the planning process, but it happened through the involvement of other divisions, such as the Parks Department, Community Services, and others.
And that happened without a shareholder direction that they had to consult this array of public servants that are listed in this report in Regent Park, correct?
Through the chair, there was a social development plan that had been created, and part of it had happened through that process. And also some of it, frankly, was informal and ad hoc. What we're trying to do here is to create a process where there's certainty, where everyone who has a part to play is contributing and being a part of the success of these initiatives.
Is there someone here from TCHC who can answer questions? Yeah. So is it part of the normal process that there's a social development plan when you guys do a revitalization?
Previously, through the chair, previously it was a formalized process. Now, TCHC, it's not required through the planning approvals process, but we do it as a best practice.
You do it as a best practice. Okay. If I'm reading recommendations 3 through 5 correctly, it effectively requires, it's not the purpose of it, but it effectively requires that TCHC always have a private development partner. Is that, it's sort of built in there, is that correct? And through 6 actually as well. They all make reference to a private development partner.
Through the chair, given the scale of the initiatives involved here, and we're talking about projects, frankly, in the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, the context of this would be that it would be partnered with a private development company.
So that's yes.
That is yes.
Thank you. I might have a second round.
Yes, thank you. And report is coming back since we had this earlier, and we've asked for a supplemental, and now we have that. I just wanted to go back a little bit. This was coupled really with the Auditor General's report, which indicated that there had not been an introduction of affordable housing in the revitalizations that TCHC has undertaken, any substantial affordable housing introduced. Correct?
The Chair, the Auditor General's report recommended that TCHC and the city have a much more stronger and robust process for looking at other city building objectives or priorities, whether it be affordable housing, other community needs, or social needs for a community, as part of the process.
And that hadn't been the case previously until we had our Housing Now plan. The Housing Now process, are we mirroring that a little bit with what the recommendations are here for these developments?
That's correct. We've aligned this process.
It's hard to hear you. Is your mic?
Sorry. That's correct. We've aligned this process to how we're approaching and managing the Housing Now projects.
And when I'm looking at the 3 projects that we asked you to take another look at, the one at Firgrove has not started at all. So it's quite possible that that could be a much more robust, more fully developed replacement, new affordable, and market plan. Is that right?
Through the chair, the Firgrove Master Plan, we've been working with City Interdivisional Table, and what we've built into the plan is additional net new affordable rental housing, provided funding is available.
So that's new, and that's started. And then Lawrence Heights as well is still, but there's no MOU, there's no formal development proposal, that you don't have a private sector developer at this point, do you, for that?
Through the chair, that is correct.
And the same with the Lawrence Heights for the next phases?
Correct.
So really, they're at a different stage. For Don Somerville, there is an MOU with a developer, correct?
Yes.
And since we started this conversation on October 23rd, 2018, at that time, there were 500 market condos, and there were 620 replacements. I'm looking at this. That's validated, correct? That's what it is?
120 rental replacement.
Yeah, rental replacement, no new affordable. And since October 23rd, 2018, we've now added in and made a number of changes, reducing market condos to 360 and having basically 50% of the site would be rental. Have I got that number right?
Correct.
And 75 new affordable. So that is, and there is an MOU, so we do have to take that into account. Would you advise us to take that into account?
Yes, there is a signed MOU between TCHC and the developer partner.
And I don't know what's in there, so that's one of the reasons why I wish to go in camera. I wish to understand that a little bit more. And that's it. So also in Tenants First, which is coming to executive on July the 4th, that's tomorrow, there's a plan that the revitalization operation at Toronto Community Housing would migrate to create TO. I'm just going to ask the Deputy City Manager if that's the plan. So the overall Housing Now approach would be very much applied to all of the sites, including Don Somerville. Should we proceed? It wouldn't be proceeding in the normal way, it would be proceeding in a different way. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Bradford?
Thanks very much. Through the chair to Mr. Gannon, I think. Could you explain to me the role of the Strategic Program Management Committee, who's on that, and what the intention, what it's there to do?
So that committee, through the chair, consists of senior staff. It's co-chaired by the head of Create TO, Brian Johnson, and Josie Skeel, the chief corporate officer.
Okay, and the intention of that, this is something different. This is a different framework now than what we saw in the report from 2 months ago. Can you explain the intention of the Strategic Program Management Committee?
Through the chair, yes, it is a updating of the approach, if you will, which also is in line with the report that will be before the executive tomorrow, as to new directions in the development process at Toronto Community Housing. And essentially bringing them in closer to the city, recognizing the range of implications that these revitalizations have, and also to ensure their future success.
Okay, so from my reading of the report, it looks like for the specific sites identified, the committee will be evaluating whether or not to go ahead with these sites. Is that what it's doing? Is that what you're coming back with in the fall?
Essentially, Councillor, the committee will be receiving a report from my office, which will be prepared in consultation with Toronto Community Housing. And this may sound laborious, but the intention here is to streamline it and get these things done so that everybody's on side.
Okay. What exactly is the process for analyzing these sites? What standards are you testing against? What analysis is going to take place? I didn't see any of that discussion in the report here.
The due diligence exercise on the sites will include particularly a check-in with planning with respect to proposed built form. This is exactly what we're doing in the sites that we're pre-zoning related to the Housing Now initiative. It will also include due diligence around the financial implications of redevelopments, risks associated with the developments, and what other city building objectives and co-location of city facilities could occur within these developments.
So you don't think that discussion, precinct planning exercises, built form studies, you don't think that will lengthen the process to deliver these sites?
I think, Councillor, through the chair, it's important that we get this right. We're building communities that will be there for 100 years plus. And as I've indicated, I think everyone is looking to row in the same direction and expedite and speed these revitalizations along. But we also want to get them right.
I guess, yeah, and I'm with you 100%, but I guess my concern, and I'm sorry to belabor this, but the 3 main recommendations in the report setting out the new process for all TCH sites direct this Strategic Program Management Committee to make a decision before anything actually comes to council, but the report doesn't give us any information about how those proposals will actually be evaluated. That's like, we could talk about built form, and we could talk about the financial impacts, but there's not a lot of detail. We're making a decision.
Through the chair, on page 6, just to clarify, we do have guiding principles. They're similar to the principles that council adopted for Housing Now. So it's really on focusing on any redevelopment, whether it be on TCHC lands or other city-owned lands, that we work with all of our partners across the city and the agencies to assess what is needed, what's best, and how we can best utilize those lands. So the guiding principles are very similar to what was adopted by council for Housing Now.
Does anything in the framework here require TCH to come to the city with new development sites? Recommendation 2 requires TCH to identify opportunities for new affordable housing. Was there a scenario before where TCH's board wouldn't bring forward sites and just simply choose to renovate instead?
So through the chair, my recollection of that process is that the revitalization sites would come through for council approval, but other reset projects, et cetera, would not necessarily come through to count for council approval. So this is looking at, TCHC will continue to look at their lands and identify opportunities, whether they need to replace the RGR units or redevelop a site. All that we're asking is, as they identify those opportunities, to have a preliminary discussion with the city divisions here, coordinated through the Housing Secretariat, so that when we come forward to council, we've already done our due diligence. We're not coming forward with one for opportunities that TCHC has identified in isolation. We're coming forward with taking a whole city approach to it.
Okay, and does this framework, does this framework take the same approach for sites that are larger scale, multi-phase, decades long, and for sites which would be smaller, quicker infill sites, more sensitive infill? Is it the same approach?
It's the same approach, but there isn't going to be as much time required on the smaller sites, hopefully. That process should be a little more streamlined. We will work with planning to understand the densities and the opportunities on the smaller sites. The idea isn't to slow it down, it's just that when these opportunities come forward to council, that council has the full information before it so it can make its best decisions.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions? I do have some questions. I just want to clarify a few things and maybe use some examples of what we're going through. So, for example, the site at Fir Grove, it includes everything from a possible childcare, a pool, a community space, that we, for example, don't know if those divisions are going to be funding or not funding. Is the intent to, when we have that first approach, when we go to the market, to have all these divisions buying into the project and assessing what the best use of that land would be?
Through the chair, yes, it is indeed the intention to do that, so that we're not missing opportunities for city building.
For city building, so that we create the highest amount of possible affordable housing and any other community uses that are important in the community.
Through the chair, absolutely. This is about the public benefits, generally speaking, and to date, what we have found in most of the revitalization projects is, yes, we have replaced the rent gear to income housing in standalone buildings, and we have then also created new condominiums. But we have not created a range of income opportunities and housing opportunities for future residents, including those that can't afford to buy condominiums.
So what you're basically saying to your corporation is that, you know, we appreciate the work that you do, but we're going to get closer to you to actually build stronger communities and leverage the asset to your residents and the community in general.
That's correct.
That's correct. And this table that I can see how some people look at all these people that have to be consulted, and it's like a lot of them, but all these people are actually part of your strategic table. There's going to be a review table that it's going to be then able to comment from all the different areas, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I think those are my only questions. Councillor Fletcher, would you still like to go in camera? Okay, so I'm going to have to ask for a motion to go in camera.
I'm not sure what reasons you're using. If you could read that and 3 reasons, because we're not really sure.
Okay, so I move that this meeting of the Planning and Housing Committee recess its public session to meet in closed session to consider a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the City of Toronto, to receive advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, and or to consider a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the City of Toronto. All those in favor? That carries. And I'm going to have to ask you to step out for a few moments. We shouldn't take too long. We should be able to resume shortly, and we'll let you know. Okay, we have quorum, so I'm calling the meeting to order once again. And are there any questions of staff? Seeing none. Speakers? Councillor Fletcher?
Yes, I do have a motion that I believe has been circulated, or if not, it's going up on the board, which would basically have us work on the Don Somerville project between now and council, which gives us a couple of weeks, and look at doing a number of things. You can see them all there. I think that it would be great to achieve more affordable rental on the site. As I did say, this site has gone from 100% market condo to outside of the replacements to a total of 50% rental, but getting more affordable rental units would be fantastic. I'd like to see the engagement run a little differently than currently exists, and look at a resident sector target, as we've done in a number of different places. We're talking about sector housing. Is it possible to do that? Look at having our AOC, which is right across the street, Apple Grove, be more involved, and I guess I'd be directing that to the DCM as ways to do that. They are staying in the neighborhood, and they will be there for a long time, so having those relationships built now is very important. And then look at the guiding principles that are in this report and just see how we're able to match up. I have gone through myself and see that out of 8 of them, I think that we can achieve about 7 out of the 8, but I want to make sure that we are all in agreement to that. And I think is there one more H? Is there an H there? No? Is that it? Just G? There's no H? Just G. Okay. So those are the motions, and I want to thank everybody for working very hard on this. And I do want to really thank Mr. Cohen, where is he today, for your patience in this long exercise of the city and TCHC figuring out how we're going to approach revitalization sites. And you have been on a site, and in the election, it was very clear that affordable housing is something that is on everybody's mind, every day, every family. And achieving affordable housing on the TCHC revitalization sites has been my goal since I took this area over, as TCH knows and the city knows and the developer knows. And as well, it is a subject of the Auditor General saying you can't just use this land for replacement and market condos. So I do want to thank everybody, particularly Mr. Cohen and the TCH staff and Mr. Gadden, for coming up with a different model here that I think will meet what I'm going to say the city's needs at this point. And also it comes at a time when we're shifting how development would be done in the city regarding affordable housing and for TCHC. So this gives us a chance right off the get-go to look at how to manage this redevelopment, probably in a little bit of a different way with much more involvement by the Housing Secretariat and by Create TO. And I did mention that executive will have tomorrow a plan to shift the development portfolio to Create TO. So this is actually a good way to initiate that and do that. I'm very happy to be able to do this and kind of open the relief valve after, I forget how many months, since October, the end of October till now, and see if we can achieve some of these things. I'm sure everybody's relieved as well. I think they are achievable. I know we can work together in the next 2 weeks to make some of these changes so that this will be a development that didn't get left behind in the Housing Now approach. It didn't get left behind in how important affordable housing is to the city, to the residents, and that we're up to the minute in what we're doing. As far as the Lawrence Heights and the remaining 80 acres and the ability to achieve affordable housing on those. I think that's very clearly a goal for the city. And for Fir Grove, it's basically the same, because there are no binding agreements. There is a binding MOU on this site, which really, I'd say that within that, these negotiations have been very successful, and I hope will continue on to achieve what this motion sets out. So thanks, everybody. Let's get to council and have a few more things that we can achieve, and then have a great development on Queen Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford? Oh, okay.
The number in item A, 1A, the number 50, is that your number, or did you pull that number from somewhere? Did you just, where'd the number come from?
The number came from me. And at 120 replacement, we'd have 100, close to 120 affordable. So however it gets moved around on the site, that would be my goal on this site, having worked very hard on that. There's 75 already. Look at adding up to 50. Unless you don't want any affordable housing, more affordable housing on the site, Councillor. You're okay with that? Adding 50?
Up to 50.
Thank you. I think we're done with the questions. Councillor Bradford?
Question of the mover, please. Would you just consider it a friendly amendment on bullet E there in consultation with the ward councillor and councillor of Ward 19, as we share a border there on Coxwell? Yep. Great.
That's a friendly
Thanks so much.
amendment. Great.
Thank
you.
We'll say the local councillors.
Okay, and any other speakers? Councillor Perks?
So I have a motion as well. But the clerk went away. Oh, there we go. Okay, so my motion is the Deputy City Manager, Community and Social Services report directly to Council on options for social housing providers to act as the developer. This report is enormously complex in terms of moving roles and responsibilities around to get better outcomes, and that's all great. But in here, it cements the notion that on every single revitalization project of Toronto community housing, there will be a private sector development partner. In other words, what it does is cement the notion that the way we pay for maintaining the social housing that we have is to sell publicly owned land, land that is owned by our housing company, to a for-profit developer. Effectively, what this does is shrink the city's capacity to provide affordable housing in the long run by selling off our housing lands to make sure that for-profit developers, land financiers, and mortgage brokers all get richer off a public asset. Everyone in the city keeps insisting that the #1 priority is to build affordable housing, but that our actual actions seem to be that our #1 priority is to take a public asset and hand it over to people who want to enrich themselves. It's exactly the opposite of what we claim to be doing. If we truly believed that we should be taking public lands and building affordable housing, we would not be inviting in private sector development partners. We would be building the capacity either within TCHC or within the not-for-profit and co-op sector to act as the developers on these lands. Sure, they'd have to hire a builder, but we would maintain these lands as lands where we build social housing. If we really meant what we say in public about our commitment to solving the affordable housing crisis, we would be taking a different approach. It's time to look under the hood for how we actually deal with public lands and ask ourselves the simple question: who should benefit from things that we as a society own through our governments? Should it be private land speculators and developers and mortgage lenders, or should it be the people who are struggling to find housing? To my mind, the question is simple and obvious, and I want city staff to show us a path for how the social side co-ops, not-for-profits, and our publicly owned housing company can act as the developer so that the profits, instead of going into private hands and then disappearing from the housing sector altogether, are kept in the housing sector to maintain the quality of the building and to build the next tranche of affordable housing. It's as simple and obvious as that.
Questions for you, Councillor Fletcher?
Currently in the Housing Now plan, there is a piece of it that says build the capacity of nonprofits and co-ops to be able to develop. Would it be appropriate, would you expect that you would hear something about where that's at if this comes to council?
So if the staff want to put that into the report, sure. We've directed them to do this on previous occasions, to do some work to build the capacity. I'm aware that a wide variety of social housing providers have been working to retain additional capacity, have been meeting with City of Toronto staff to talk about capacity building. I also believe that it's necessary that we send a clear signal to TCHC or Create TO or the director of housing or somewhere in the city that we also build the capacity to act as the developer on the public side. Obviously, we need to do some capacity building, and I think that's implied.
So, okay, I won't amend that as long as you're expecting that.
I am expecting that, yes.
On that.
Yeah.
Those who currently actually do building on their own, such as Wood Green,
yes,
very accomplished builder. There may be others, and others in the sector who haven't built for a long time.
Yeah.
And that would be co-ops who haven't built for 20 or 25
and Councillor
years.
Fletcher, I know this is something you're passionate about. I know that just recently there was a conference at U of T that you attended where those actors that you're describing brought in expertise from British Columbia, where they are building the capacity of the co-op, not-for-profit, and public housing sector to do this work. It's something that unless we as a committee and council send a strong message on, will never happen.
Then I'm just going to, not amending it, but going to ask that you would expect that some of those examples, like the BC example, would be included here to show that that's very possible once you can develop the capacity.
I'm pretty sure that the Deputy City Manager, Community and Social Services is aware of our views on the necessity of building that capacity, and will include it in the report.
Include the examples of successful examples.
That would be extraordinarily helpful.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford? Yep.
Okay. Thanks very much. So I see this report kind of in two pieces. The first part is setting out a framework for making sure we're trying to leverage the most out of very limited city assets. These are once-in-a-generation opportunity. If we can get a good process in place, we will look back on this and we'll be grateful, and we'll have actually made some progress on our goals and our targets here in the City of Toronto. The second piece is more concerning for me, as you've heard in my questions and comments today. And I'm concerned that we've actually, in the need to develop a modernized process, we've muddied that with the urgent need to deliver affordable housing on these three sites. When I read the report, and admittedly, we just kind of read it last night, and it is a complicated report, but I'm not seeing how we're delivering new affordable housing on these three sites as quickly as possible. What I'm seeing with the recommendations as they were proposed was leaving these real projects that could have shovels in the ground, leaving them into further reports, further discussions, and delays on these sites. We do need to be building affordable housing, and how we're going to build it we can discuss, but we do need to be building affordable housing as quickly as possible. We're supposed to be working towards our city's priority of 40,000 units, and it seems like with some of the discussion in the process here, we're actually setting up barriers to three sites that are ready to go. My comments and questions were, of course, around Don Somerville. That's immediately adjacent to my ward there on Coxwell. And because when you look at the report on page 13, you see the new proposed plan. You see 195 market rental units. You see 75 affordable rental units, 270 new rental units. You got the 120 RGI. This is stuff that we have to make sure that we're moving forward, and staff directions to report back again after 2 months of reporting with another report update that actually doesn't give us the direction. I'm not happy about that. There's been tenant consultation meetings. There's been Q&A online for tenants. The process actually started in 2012. That's on TCHC's website. And again, the report is saying, let's have another report in the fall. So you got to ask ourselves, like, how did we get here? I don't know what the answer is to that, but I think it's critical that we move faster on the sites where we can really deliver affordable housing. I really do appreciate Councillor Fletcher's motion to bring this to council in 2 weeks' time. I will certainly be looking forward to having a decision on this. And I think it's an important conversation. It really sets the tone here in the city. We have our 11 Housing Now sites. We have more sites coming in the pipeline. And the message we need to send is that there is a clear and predictable pathway forward to actually unlock these sites. And whatever that looks like, that's something that we can discuss, but it has to be clear, it has to be consistent, and we have to get going with this. There's also, a number of additional city-owned parcels in this area, and I do think if we're moving forward with this new approval process, we should be identifying all of the opportunities in the wards, lining them up, and leveraging those assets together. I've spoken with staff at CreateTO about these properties and these opportunities. There's some agreement there. So I would like to see that move forward with some precinct planning or discussions around these opportunities in the collective. We've had a very productive 6 months here on this committee. We've passed and moved a number of really important initiatives. But we have to do more. I do find aspects of this report frustrating, but I am glad we're moving forward with the clarity on how we're actually going to secure our city building objectives. It's a language that we talk about a lot on these limited assets. But again, we do need to get on with the affordable housing piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers from the committee?
I'll just
Councillor
say
Robinson?
3 words, and that is I'll be supporting staff recommendations and Councillor Fletcher's. I'm not supporting Councillor Perks because there simply isn't any capacity for such an effort. It's already very strained. We all know that. And it's not the role. So I will not be supporting that motion before us.
Thank you. To speak, let me turn myself. I'd like to start by thanking staff from bringing us this report. I think many of us had some concerns from the last time the report was here, and I think we need to step back and understand the actual shift that has happened in the city in the way that we've been dealing with our land. Just a few years ago, not that long ago, maybe I would say 3-4 years ago, we were selling land for cash. That's what the city was doing. We were selling land for cash. We have now created CreateTO when the Housing Now program, and we've had a very conscious decision that we were going to use our land and we were going to leverage our land to create affordable housing and to create city building opportunities. We've also now worked with TCHC, who, let's be honest, has done an incredible amount of work given the resources that they had to leverage their land to actually deal with an issue that was for many years ignored by all 3 levels of government, which was the backlog. For years, this corporation was left to themselves without, and having to deal with revitalizations and everything to deal with the backlog. So what we're doing now is actually partnering with our own corporation to say, no, it's not only good enough to replace the RGI units, because we're coming to the table, we're bringing cash, we're bringing other levels of government to help with that issue as well. And since we're doing that, let's take the opportunity to use that land and do something else. And it's not only on TCHC to do that, it's on the city, it's on all the departments, it's about building communities. So yes, from a few years ago, we've started new processes, and there has been a couple sites that got in the mix in here. And I think, it's created a level of frustration to a few of us, but now I think we have a path forward. That's what I'm hoping to have. And once we look back, we actually say, you know what, this is in response to what a new approach the city has, which is actually not only replacing the RGI, but creating mixed communities with some affordable housing. And that's what we're doing here with Don Somerville. And I'm actually looking forward to having the 2 other sites coming back in September. There's great potential on these sites to have more affordable housing, to have other city services in there. And therefore, I think that having this holistic view and holistic approach from different departments right at the beginning, right as the site is identified, I don't think is going to slow down things. I think actually it's going to speed them up. Because instead of through the end, coming to City Council and saying, we're short, like we just happened at Regent Park for 2 of the buildings, or we now need an aqua center, or we need to fundraise for a library because, we would love to have a library at Regent Park, but it's not funded. I think we need to turn that process around and start it with a bigger commitment from the city on city building and community building from the beginning, and saying, TCHC, go ahead, we're right here behind you, and we acknowledge that this is not your project, this is our project, and that the city buys in. And at the end of the day, what we're hoping that this is going to create is more certainty to the developers, so that after you sign an MOU, after you sign, you go out, you know for sure that the city is already behind this project, and that you have no surprises throughout the process. So I think that that's where we want to head, is that creates some certainty, it creates better communities, and at the end of the day, we leverage our assets to the highest potential. And I think that Councillor Perks brings an important point, which is the capacity building of our nonprofit. We've been trying hard to do that. We did it through the Housing Now. There's specifically money allocated. There's specifically sites allocated that are going to be marketed specifically to the nonprofit sector. And that's work that we as a city need to do, is work hand in hand, because we need to do capacity building with our nonprofit sector, so that eventually when we have sites that we need to build 2,000 units, we have people, the sector out there, that they're going to be able to say, we'll take it, we're going to do it, and that we have it in perpetuity. So I'm happy to support that. I do have also a motion to add to Councillor Fletcher's motions on Don Somerville, which is actually about the jobs that sometimes we get created through these programs. We can leverage these things. I'm a big proponent of social procurement and leveraging jobs opportunities. As we are developing these sites, as we are creating jobs, let's make sure that our tenants are also benefiting of that, and let's do it in a proper way. Let's make sure we document that. Let's make sure we understand that we are actually giving the opportunity, giving careers to some of our tenants. That's how you fully revitalize the communities. It's not only about the brick and mortars, it's about people's lives as well. So I hope that I can also get your support for this part of the motion. And I'm moving staff's recommendations. So, this one is Don Somerville. And the other 2 sites staff recommendations, yes. Okay. 4 amendments. Councillor Fletcher's motions. All those in favor? Recorded vote.
All those in favor of Councillor Fletcher's motion, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Perks, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Bailão. All those opposed? Are you in favor? Yeah. Councillor Robinson, that motion carries.
And Councillor Perks' motion. All those in favor?
All those in favor? All those in favor of the motion before you, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Perks, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Bailão. All those opposed? Councillor Robinson. That motion carries.
And staff recommendations. Recorded vote.
All those in favor of the recommendations in the staff report 4A, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Perks, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Bailão, Councillor Robinson. Any opposed? That motion carries.
There's one more. One more. Yep. And my last motion. All those in favor? Recorded vote.
All those in favor of motion before you from Councillor Bailão, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Perks, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Bailão, Counselor Robinson. Any opposed? That motion carries.
Okay, and that takes care of item 7.4. Great. Item 7.5, expanding the housing allowance program. Gautam Mukherjee? Gautam? No? Okay. Your name is, yep, your name is further down, yep. Barry Whistler? Barry, okay. Good morning, at least for another 7 minutes.
It's morning still.
Yes, still.
Good morning, councillors and staff. My name is Barry Weisletter. I'm a resident of Ward 11, University Rosedale, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Toronto Venezuela Solidarity Coalition, which encompasses several grassroots organizations, a number of members of which are seated behind me. For a number of months, I have sought to address this committee on the subject of Toronto's housing crisis and what we think this city, this province, and this country can learn from a highly successful social housing program underway in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. I endorse all efforts to expand Toronto's housing allowance program, including the creation of a new upper tier of the municipal land transfer tax. The Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative should address priorities in the areas of housing supply and affordability. And frankly, as the discussion recently, just moments ago, reflected, we need a crash program of land assembly and social and cooperative housing construction to house the homeless and to take pressure off rents. And that is where Venezuela enters the picture. Its achievement over the past 8 years is nothing less than spectacular. I call it a social wonder of the modern world. And I propose that this committee and council as a whole take some positive action. I suggest that you invite experts from Venezuela to come to Toronto to share their knowledge of the Gran Misión Vivienda, the Great Housing Project, and send some city councillors or social housing officials to Venezuela to witness and learn about housing achievements in that South American country. This can be done at no expense to City Council. Here are some facts. 1, the United Nations has recognized Venezuela as one of the top countries for guaranteeing people's right to housing at the first United Nations Habitat Assembly, which took place in Nairobi, Kenya, May 27 to 31 this year, with 193 countries represented there. The UN Habitat is the UN's highest decision-making body on the subject of sustainable urban development and housing. Venezuela's Minister for Habitat, Ildemaro Villarroel, told the Assembly, quote, "The Gran Misión Vivienda continues to be an example to the world that housing in Venezuela is a social right rather than a commodity," close quote. The Gran Misión has been operative for 8 years. Its aim is to counter social exclusion and injustice due to the historic housing deficit in Venezuela. It has housed 2,621,703 Venezuelan families throughout the country. It was created by President Hugo Chavez, inspired when in 2011 a powerful freak storm left 100,000 families homeless. It has been carried forward by President Nicolas Maduro, even in these days of economic warfare waged against the country. Illegal sanctions by the USA, Canada, and the EU have robbed Venezuela of its foreign accounts, its gold deposits, and have disrupted oil exports, blocked international commerce, causing a shortage of food and medicines. This has caused the deaths of 40,000 Venezuelans, especially those in a precarious state of health. In November 2018, the keys to home number 2,400,000 were given to a family in Maturin in the state of Monagas. Currently, 130,000 units are being built of the 500,000 that are scheduled to be finished this year. A total of 3 million housing units are to be reached this December, and 5 million more are scheduled for completion by 2025. The program consists of housing that is sometimes fully constructed by professionals and others constructed by the communities themselves with professional supervision. It is not simply a program of building houses on an empty lot. It is an endeavor of building communities with work programs, schools, daycare, government service offices, markets. It does not build isolated low-income ghettos where the poor are kept at bay. The units are integrated throughout the cities and towns as an organic part of city and rural life. The program develops agreeable and integrated housing zones that make available a full range of social services from education to healthcare, which likens its vision to that of the new urbanism model. There are three categories in this project: personal, familial, and community. Well, I'll have to come back 5 months from now to finish this proposal, but I'll just conclude by saying that people can access credit for the program called Credit Habitat, which President Maduro has just increased to US $40 million and allows individuals to engage in this thing. Last sentence.
Thank you.
Last sentence.
You're
I conclude
well over
by
your
urging
5
you to
minutes.
undertake an exchange on the subject of housing provision, Toronto, Venezuela, or Toronto, Caracas, if you will.
Thank you.
Such an endeavor will also
Any questions
foster
of the speaker?
peace and respect for national
Sir?
sovereignty in
Sir,
this
you're well over
hemisphere.
your 5
Thank
minutes.
you very much.
Thank you. Any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you for joining us here today. Pablo Escobar? Pablo? I don't think Pablo is here. Kira Hannick? Kira? Good morning, Kira.
Good morning. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, councillors and staff. The Toronto Alliance to End Homelessness, as you know, is a collective impact initiative working to end homelessness in Toronto, and we're also your and the city's Community Advisory Board on homelessness. Our vision is zero chronic homelessness in Toronto, which means at any given time we have more housing than we have people experiencing homelessness. I should say too that we appreciate the motions and the amendments and the discussion around 7.4. Really important to see a variety of city interests working together in a coordinated way to address these issues. So we wrote in support of motion MM52 when it went before council in March, initially introducing the housing allowances, and we commend councillors Bilal, Cressy, and Bradford for tabling it then and for continuing to champion it along with Mayor Tory as well. There's no doubt that housing allowances are a critical tool in ending people's homelessness. Allowances provide a pathway to stable housing and effectively prevent and divert people from experiencing homelessness. In turn, this keeps people out of shelter, releasing some of the well-documented and widely understood pressures on our city's emergency system, including respite centers, where people are now aging into chronic homelessness. The submission that is attached to your report today was originally written in May, and it spoke to that context. My next comments are going to speak more to what's happened since then and the supplementary report. So, since then, the use of the OFI, Ontario Provincial Housing Initiative, funds for this allowance has been established. It's in the report, and it's critical that this funding be used in this way because it maintains not only the benefits of those people that were on the old Toronto Housing Allowance Program, it adds significant new people to that allowance. Beyond this, however, we are looking forward to exploring other revenue tools in order to make deeper housing allowances available. Housing allowances, to be effective for all people living in homelessness, must also be strategically designed to meet today's realities. This means that they must honestly respond to the current cost of housing in Toronto and the disparity between this and the income of most people needing an allowance. For example, it must be deep enough per household to make up the difference between the OW shelter allowance maximum of $390 per month for a single adult and the true average market rent in Toronto. The affordability gap here cannot be overstated. In 2017, the city itself identified that the difference between CMHC average market rents, which is our traditional benchmark, and the real asking rents in Toronto was anywhere between 40 to 68%. There's a chart in the deputation we submitted back in May that shows the difference for a variety of apartment sizes. It means, however, that instead of designing an allowance to meet average market rent, we need to make these allowances deep enough to afford the asking rent in real time. In other words, a target of 80% of average market rent is no longer enough to create true affordability and to end people's homelessness. We recommend it be 100% of average market rent. Two other critical points we recommend as part of any new tool are that it reflect the real cost of rental housing by moving up and down as rents do, and that housing allowances become permanently available for all relocations, including illegal evictions. And that could be something that the new task force, I think that came from the last meeting of this committee on renovictions, could look at. As the city's Community Advisory Board, we will be working with SSHA and the Housing Secretariat to identify opportunities through our coordinated work, including, but not limited to, Housing Toronto, the SSHA service planning, and the Reaching Home investments. We'll be able to work and look at how all these revenue sources and program guidelines can be used to increase our pool of housing allowances and to make some of them deeper for the reasons I just noted. We'll also be looking at the OFI investment plan. The first part of that will be articulated and is due in September, as your following motion lets you know. And we'll be looking at opportunities and
I'm
asking.
going to have to ask you to wrap up.
Yeah, asking all of you to do that as well, so that we can maximize the impact of the allowances overall in the city of Toronto.
Great, thank you. Any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you for your support and partnership. Any other speakers on this item? Seeing none, questions of staff? Councillor Robinson?
Wants to?
I didn't see anybody else.
Okay. So I guess, in reading the report, I'd just like you to clarify your concerns about using the MLTT to fund this program.
Councillor, through the chair, it wasn't as much the concern with the MLTTT, it was the fact that there was an alternate source of revenue that was provided by the federal and provincial governments. And so this was essentially a tailor-made revenue source that could be used to do this, and that seemed to be the approach that would be best one to be taken.
So how much funding is the city set to receive through the COCHI and the OPHI programs?
So in total, I believe the number is 178 million, and a portion of that would be attributable to the 3,200 housing allowances that are proposed to be delivered.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford?
So a couple quick questions. As part of the Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative, what other programs are eligible to receive funding under this initiative besides the housing allowance program?
Councillor, through the chair, there are a number of other initiatives that this funding will be used and deployed for. The next report deals with those. It also includes capital for new housing developed in partnership with the nonprofit sector, as well as repairs for seniors, eligible repairs for low-income seniors in their homes. And then lastly, it provides for a small home ownership component for first-time home buyers as well.
Okay, and the next report will have some of the more specifics on those pieces?
That's correct, Council.
Okay. Do we have an estimate as to the upcoming pressures on our shelter system? What was the percentage change in pressures from 2017 to 2018?
Through the chair, our occupancy remains fairly steady at above 90%, even though we have increased capacity by a few thousand beds. It's very difficult to predict demand in the shelter system, given the complexities of people's needs, but I would anticipate that we will continue to experience the same level of pressure.
Okay. And then our goal of 1,000 new shelter beds, how are we progressing in terms of delivering that goal?
Through the chair, we had a report for information at ECDC this month giving an update on that. We have located 80% of the beds required for the 1,000 beds. They will come online over the next couple of years, various construction schedules. We continue to search for the last few properties, but staff have made excellent progress on that initiative. However, even with the 300 new beds that we already have online this year, we have not seen an impact on the occupancy.
Okay, thanks very much, appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Perks?
Yeah, my question isn't on the main line. It has to do, though, with a paragraph on page 5 of the report where you're examining council's direction to consider using the MLTT or a tax on the top end of the MLTT, surcharge on the top end of the MLTT to fund some of this. Paragraph 3 says, corporate finance will table a report on the city's revenue options at budget committee in June 2019 and suggests that that's the proper place to have that discussion. I went and looked, and there is no report that went to the budget committee in June 2019. Can someone tell me when we'll get that revenue option report?
Through the chair, there was a report to council and executive on budget implications, but it was more specific to the impact of the province's changes. I will report back to you on that, and I'll consult with our colleagues in corporate finance on when that report will be coming.
Okay. Just once again, Madam Chair, Council directs finance staff to give us some options on financial planning, and once again, it seems to just not happen.
Duly noted. Any other questions? I do have some questions. I just, so the 3,200 housing allowances are on top of the existing ones that we have?
That's correct, Councillor. We currently have about 5,400 people receiving allowances. This money would allow us to continue placing at about 100 people per month over the next few years.
Okay, and are we targeting specifically our homelessness population or at risk of being homeless? Is that the goal?
Currently, our focus is on chronically homeless, people experiencing chronic homelessness, which is a period of more than 6 months.
And remind us again, what's the cost of a night in one of our shelters? How much does it cost the city?
We have an average per diem of about $105 a night for a shelter bed, and typically that shelter bed is used over the course of a year by about 5 different people.
So and this, the housing allowances goes for about, how much do you need to have a housing allowance to house somebody that is chronically homeless?
There are various levels of existing housing allowances. The ones that we're proposing in this report are $600 a month.
Okay. So significantly more economic than continuing just to build more shelter beds.
That would be correct, Councillor. There'd also be the peripheral benefits of people having secure and stable housing, which has an impact on their overall health and well-being.
And I want to touch a little bit on that. So how do we make sure that people are being housed in a stable condition? There are kept housing. Are we following up? Are we keeping track to make sure that we are being successful and that people are not just, housed for a few months and then, back on the street again? Like, how do we support that work?
Councillor, so we do track people. We continue to follow up with them. We've been really pleased to see that we have more than an 80% rate staying housed after 1 year. So, you know, when people are matched with the right supports and the right housing solution, they do, on the most part, have success.
Okay, good. And the 3,200 subsidies that were created, so we used now the money from the provincial and federal government, and we have different programs that could be used, but we chose a big chunk of this to be specifically targeted at this population to target this issue. Is that an option that we had? And
that is correct, Councillor. We had a pressure where the money that we had been using to house people with housing allowances had reached the end. And we needed to either stop placing people with housing allowances or find a new funding source, and this provided us with that option. And again, we need to make sure we continue to move people through our homeless shelter. It is meant to be a temporary place for people until they can secure housing.
And when is this money starting to flow?
It will start in August.
Okay, so as of August, we'll have access to these funds, so this is imminent to start at any minute. We can start placing people.
That's right. We'll be seeking council approval in July, and then we'll be ready to start placing the following month.
Okay, great. Thank you. Speakers? Nobody wants to speak on the item?
I will, if nobody else will. I'll just say make a couple points, and that is that I agree with staff's take on this and their recommendation and the availability of the other funding sources that are now in play. And that's really all I wanted to say. I thank them for this report and for looking at these alternate options.
Thank you so much, Councillor Robinson. I do have two motions. One motion is to basically continue the very close work collaboration that we've been having with the Toronto Alliance to End Homelessness. It has been really beneficial. I think staff could agree with me that has been really beneficial to work closely with them on implementing and tracking and getting their feedback on how to target chronic homelessness and really focus these funds to ensure that we're housing people and that we're keeping them housed. And so I want to make sure that this collaboration continues. As some of you remember, we brought this request to have more housing allowances, knowing that our shelter system continues to be under a lot of pressure. And what we want to create is different ways to maintain people housed and to create more capacity without continuous having the discussion around building more shelters. Everybody understands that we need to build is more housing, and particular supportive housing, and that takes time, and that's why it is so important to have programs like this around housing allowances so that we can immediately, as of August, start taking some of the pressure away and making sure that that we house people as soon as possible. So it's over 3,000 that we're going to have at our disposal. It is a great number. I think that as a committee, we'll be paying close attention on how successful the program is. We know that last year we had a pilot with 200 housing allowances, and it was extremely successful. I think this takes it to a total different level. I'm happy to see that, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results and continue to working with the Toronto Alliance to End Homelessness. The other motion I have is around the MLTT. As most of you know, there was a source of revenue that we had identified. We were able to get this program using one source of revenue, that is the provincial and federal funds. However, with conversations with many people around the municipal land transfer tax, which is all around housing and real estate. It's the funds that we take from our real estate. Lots of people said, maybe it's time to have a review on, for example, the tiers, and to make sure that it actually responds to the housing policy that we're trying to create. So, for example, we have tiers, we have exemptions for first-time home buyers. Is that the right kind of exemption? We had the proposal to create a different tier. Does that make sense? I think that instead of just going into the idea of one, creating a new tier. Maybe what we need to do is ensure that our taxing and our financial policies match the other policies that we're creating in the city. And so that's why I'm asking the Planning and Housing Secretary and our Chief Financial Officer just to make sure as we embark in a new 10-year housing plan that we have the financial tools that actually go hand in hand with the policies that we're creating. And that assist in furthering those goals. So with that said, I ask for your support for these two motions and for the report. And again, thank you, staff, for a good report. Okay, first motion.
Question for the mover on the second motion.
Yep.
And so what do you think is not correct about the way it's flowing right now and how it's being dispersed, the MLTT?
So I don't know, for example, so we have an exemption of for first-time home buyers for $400,000, right? Is that the right amount in Toronto anymore? Should we have it? Should we not have it? Should we actually have a little bit more on that? Can you buy anything with $400,000 nowadays? So that's the kind of conversations, I think, instead of just focusing on one, we have to, what kind of points of the housing spectrum we're going to be touching with the housing policy, and something like the land transfer tax, which is all around the use of land and real estate, should actually work hand in hand to make sure that, you know, we're giving with one hand and taking with the other, that actually it works hand in hand for the goals that we have as a city.
So I'm sure you're aware the MLTT is not really a stable source due to market fluctuations.
Yeah, if it was for me, I would have it all going to capital projects.
And the changes
all
in
housing.
Sales year to year.
Housing, paying for housing. I'd love to do that.
So it's not really a stable source, right? It fluctuates every year, as we know, as we well know, and changes in the sales, you know, year to year. So it's not overly.
And this is, there's certain things that you're doing. Like I gave you the example of the first-time home buyers. You exempt now first-time home buyers. Why? Because you want to create the opportunity for first-time home buyers to make it easier for them to buy. That's a housing policy. So you need to make sure that your fiscal policy actually responds to your housing policy. We have, as you said, been told by our finance department that the MLTT is not a stable source of revenue, that we should actually divert much of that money to capital, which we've started doing as of last year. Should that be going to housing? That's another conversation that we should have, but I just want to make sure that we don't have a fiscal tool that is not responding to the new housing policy tools that we're actually creating. These things need to work hand in hand.
So you're not saying that, I mean, this line of aligning and supporting, that's what I'm concerned about. Is that changing the envelope? Are you trying to alter where the funds go with that line, or I'm not sure what your objective is from the last three lines of your motion.
It could be. I don't want to be prescriptive. I mean, if staffs actually say, you know what, by doing different tiers, we could actually probably expect a little bit more revenue, and it should be directed to the capital support of housing, I would be fine with that.
Okay.
Okay. First motion. No? Okay. So first motion, all those in favor? That carries. Second motion, all those in favor? That carries. Okay, recorded vote. Paula, you want to be recorded?
All those in favor of the motion before you, Councillor Bradford, Councillor Perks, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Bailão. Any opposed? Councillor Robinson. That motion carries.
Okay, and that takes care of item 7.5. Thank you. 7.6, activating federal provincial funding to increase housing options for Toronto residents. First speaker, Derek German. No, we'll probably have a chance to hear maybe one or two speakers. That's about it. I don't think, we have speakers everywhere else. Yeah. Derek? Good morning.
Good morning.
5 minutes. Thanks for joining us today. Good afternoon.
So I'm supporting the acquisition by the city of the property right on the corner, near the corners of Dundas and Sherbourne, 230 Sherbourne. The city knows about that property. They know a lot about that property. They know some of the illegal things that happened on that property, the suffering of the people on that property. And in 1985, I was one of the people that found Drina Joubert in the back alley, or just on that property. The death of Drina Joubert led to an amazing anger at that time of ordinary people and of councillors and of the bureaucrats. Naturally, who wanted homeless people to die, to be frozen to death in the back of a truck? So there was a response, and many of the people, even in this room, if they're old enough, in 1985, they were part of the process that brought about, after the inquest around Drina Joubert and the great protests, 3,000 units of single housing came about across Ontario. That has to do with this property. And beyond that, the subsidies, we've just been discussing subsidies. Singles were suddenly allowed to get subsidies in public housing. This was a great, great reform. And now we come back to this property which has seen such damage and seen such horror. This property for many years now has been used for speculation. It sat there looking across the street at the suffering and the people dying. We've had many deaths on that street. People froze to death. We demonstrated once when a man hung himself behind Maxwell Megan, just south of this building. This happens all the time. And this place, this building must be ours. We must make it a monument to this kind of world that we want. We don't want homelessness. I don't think you want homelessness. I think there's a degree of cowardice involved. But most people don't want homelessness. And we want that place to be ours. We wanted a place for ordinary people where I and other people who are ordinary can live and afford them. So just one more reason. On Canada Day, I wonder how many people celebrated Canada Day the way I celebrated Canada Day. That was just a couple of days ago. I live south of this building on Sherbourne and the Esplanade, 176 the Esplanade. And in the morning at around 10 a.m., my roommate said, there's something happening in the backyard here. And we looked out over the balcony and we saw numerous police, maybe 15. And they were all near the garbage bins. A homeless man there named Aaron died there that morning. In my backyard, he died. And this building has remained empty. This building remains empty, laughing at the homeless people as they pass it. This building should be made for us ordinary people in this city. And we'll chat no more. This would be one place, and it should be an example that you don't speculate and laugh and make fun, because it's making fun when you do nothing when people die and get injured. So I ask that you expropriate this property and make it ours. Make what happened in 1985, 1986 happen again.
Gonna have
There
to
are
ask you to
people
wrap up.
here who know about what happened there, and it
Thank
can
you.
be replicated. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. Any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you for joining us today. We're going to have to wrap up because we don't have enough time to have another speaker before lunch, so we'll see you all back here at 1:30.